Okay, so we're reading session 8 today, and it's a unique session. Really stands out. It's what Rob would call very transient material. It's a lot of UFO stuff, and Don is incredulous. Don doesn't even believe Rob what he says.
All right.
It's a really interesting session, but you know, so it's a little more into the transient than we normally are, so we can just intend to well, whatever, we'll go where it goes.
We'll have fun with it.
Yeah, we'll have fun with it, and you know, we'll also remember that we're studying the law of one too. So yeah, so yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Ra and give them so much thanks and love and light from this group to their group for bringing through this information that we study and these reminders of oneness and this profound teaching of how to navigate the spiritual path in a good way. Thank you, Ra. Thank you to those of the Confederation. Thank you to LL Research. And thanks to you folks as well for being here, and all your higher selves and all of our spirit guides and allies. Thanks, team. Okay. Session 8. This photo is interesting. I found this little cache of photos that were declassified from some Navy mission down to Antarctica. And apparently these are photographs of UFOs that they encountered there. This is the most interesting one. It's from way back. This is from like I don't remember, a long time ago, decades and decades ago. I've got some notes.
Y'all can pin his video if you want it to get big on your screen, by the way.
Yeah, it might be helpful here while we read through these notes. This is the content. I'll just read through them real quick. So 1, request for so-called Confederation advertising to help create awareness of the books to be published. 2, some UFO landings of Earth-based origin and craft are weaponized. 3, location of bases of military complex activity. 4, operations by national security apparatuses of multiple governments of Earth, including the United States. 5, technological origins of the UFO, Nikola Tesla's work, and a Confederation transfer now seen to be made in error. 6, psychotronic and particle beam weaponry. 7, the nature of governmental secrecy. 8, the number of craft in US, and then also speed characteristics of those craft. 9, potential for UFO-based technologies to resolve societal problems if shared openly. 10, the Orion agenda and its objectives, types of landings and the location of bases. 11, Charlie Hickson's contact experience and the purpose and origin of the entities who contacted him. 12, additional info on US UFO craft, the number of people in the US who are aware of them and the location of their construction. 13, Daniel Fry's contact experience. 14, question about direct Confederation contact. And then finally, Don's incredulity regarding US craft and information about the craft's diameter. Yeah, so that's a quick overview. Fascinating material. Anybody want to get us started with the reading?
I'll start.
Great.
Session. I greet you in the love and the light of the infinite creator. I communicate now. Questioner. I have a question about what I call the advertising of. There have been certain contacts allowed, as I understand, by the council, but this is limited because of the free will of those who are not oriented in such a way that they could maybe want contact. This material that we are doing now will be disseminated. Dissemination of this material will be dependent upon the wants of a relatively small number of people on the planet. They will not.
Gotta pause you. You're cutting out a bit, so maybe either turn your video off or
Yeah. I'll try that.
Okay.
Turn the video off. Okay, dissemination of this material will be dependent upon the wants of a relatively small number of people on the planet. Many people on the planet now want this material, but even though we disseminate it, they will not be aware it is available. Is there any possibility of creating some effect which I would call advertising, or is this against the principle of free will? Is that better?
It's perfect. Yeah, we can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Great. Ra, I am Ra. Consider, if you will, the path your life experience complex has taken. Consider the coincidences and odd circumstances by which one thing flowed to the next. Consider this well. Each information source beingness does not have uses in the life experience complex of each of those among your peoples who seek. Thus, the advertisement is general and not designed to indicate the searching out of any particular material, but only to suggest the nominal aspect of the illusion. I looked up that word, by the way. Questioner. There was a portion of the material yesterday, which I will read, where you say, there's a certain amount of landing taking place. Some of these landings are of your peoples. Some are of the entities known to your group, to you as the group of Orion. My first question is, what did you mean by the landings are of your peoples? And Ra says, I am Ra. Your peoples have at this time space present the technological achievement, if you would call it that, of being able to create and fly the shape and type of craft known to you as unidentified flying objects. Unfortunately, for the social memory complex vibratory rate of your peoples, these devices are not intended for the service of mankind, but for potential destructive uses. This further muddles the vibratory nexus of your social memory complex, causing a situation whereby neither those oriented towards serving others nor those oriented towards serving self can gain the energy/power which opens the gates to intelligent infinity for the social memory complex. This in turn causes the harvest to be small. Continue?
Yeah, do one more.
8.3, questioner. Are these craft that are of our people from what we call planes that are not incarnate at this time? Where are they based? I am Ra. These of which we spoke are of third density and are part of the so-called military complex of various of your people's societal divisions or structures. The bases are varied. There are bases, as you would call them, undersea in your southern waters near the Bahamas, as well as in your Pacific seas in various places close to your Chilean borders on the water. There are bases upon your moon, as you call this satellite, which are at this time being reworked. There are bases which move about your lands. There are bases, if you would call them that, in your skies. These are the bases of your peoples, very numerous, and as we have said, potentially destructive.
Okay. Someone else want to pick up?
I can read.
Great.
8.4. Where do the people who operate these craft come from? Are they affiliated with any nation on Earth? What is their source? Ra. These people come from the same place as you or I. They come from the Creator. As you intend the question, in its shallower aspect, these people are those in your and other selves governments responsible for what you would term national security. Questioner. Am I to understand then that the United States has these craft in undersea bases? I am Ra. You are correct. Questioner. How did the United States learn of the technology to build these land inaudible? I am Ra. There was a mind-body-spirit complex known to your people by the vibratory sound complex Nikola. This entity departed the illusion, and the papers containing the necessary understandings were taken by the mind-body-spirit complexes serving your security of national divisional complex. Thus, your people became privy to the basic technology. In the case of those mind-body-spirit complexes, which you call the Russians, the technology was given from one of the Confederation in an attempt approximately 27 of your years ago to share information and bring about peace among your peoples. The entities giving this information were in error. but we did many things at the end of the cycle in attempts to aid your harvest, from which we've learned the folly of certain types of aid. That is a contributing factor to our more cautious approach at this date, even as the need is power upon power greater, and your people's call is greater and greater. Questioner, I'm puzzled by these craft that we have undersea bases for. They are inaudible. Is this technology sufficient to overshadow all other armaments? Do we have just the ability to fly in these craft, or are there any weapons? Like were they given to us inaudible, or are they just craft for transport? What is the basic mechanism of their inaudible? It's really hard to believe, is what I'm saying. I am wrong. The craft are perhaps misnamed in some instances. It would appear more appropriate to consider them as weaponry. The energy used is that of the field of electromagnetic energy, which polarizes the Earth's sphere. The weaponry is of two basic kinds: that which is called by your people's psychotronic, and that which is called by your people's particle beam. The amount of destruction which is contained in this technology is considerable, and the weapons have been used in many cases to alter weather patterns and to enhance the vibratory change which engulfs your planet at this time. Questioner, how have they been able to keep this a secret? Why aren't these craft in use for transport? The governments of each of your societal division illusions desire to refrain from publicity so that the surprise may be retained in case of hostile action from what your peoples call enemies. How many of these craft does the United States have? I am wrong. The United States has 573 at this time. They are in the process of adding to this number. Questioner, what is the maximum speed of one of these craft? I'm raw. The maximum speed of these craft is equal to Earth energy squared. This field varies. The limit is approximately 1/2 the speed of light, as you would call it. This is due to imperfections in design. Questioner, wouldn't this type of craft totally solve or come close to solving a lot of the energy problems as far as transport goes that we're using to transporting inaudible? I am raw. The technology your peoples possess at this time is capable of resolving each and every limitation which plagues your social memory complex at this present nexus of experience. However, the concerns of some of your beings with distortions towards what you would call powerful energy cause these solutions to be withheld until the solutions are so needed that those with the distortion can then become further distorted in the direction of power.
Okay, let's pause there. Thanks. So WTF, right? This session is so crazy, y'all.
It's from like 30 years ago.
It blew, all right, it's 30, yeah.
40 years ago.
40 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah,
it's-
talking about like weather pattern distortion
Mhm.
and 573 of those crafts, and all of this was 40 years ago.
40 years ago, right?
Yeah. That's intense.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing information here.
So that's why like all the Tic Tac videos came out, and then all the military guys are like, oh yeah, that's probably Russia. Like instead of being like just in utter shock, like, oh yeah, it's probably Russia. Or probably their own, I don't know how splintered the US government is.
Yeah.
I don't know what came out on TikTok.
No, it didn't come out on TikTok. They're calling this they released, the US government, I think it was the Navy, released a video. They said it was official. It's video footage from a fighter plane that picked up this little craft. It's called a Tic Tac. They call it a Tic Tac because it's kind of spherical.
It looks like a Tic Tac.
Yeah.
Tic Tac.
And and it has capabilities that are like, it's able to, the speed it can move, and it's the way it can, whatever. It's anomalous. It's a UFO.
Oh.
And it was a big deal because it came out like 2 years ago or something. And it was a big deal because it's the first time the US government's ever officially put out footage of a UFO that they say is a legitimate UFO.
Mhm.
Got it.
There's been big shifts in the past 2 years of like how the mainstream media and the US government is approaching the UFO topic.
I can imagine at that time, 1980s, Don being as shocked as he is, because that information was so clandestine. I didn't really catch wind of it till I started watching Cosmic Disclosure like 5 years ago or so, and how much that, and that's why I couldn't stop watching it, like 120 episodes in 6 months or something. But there's there's a couple things in there that I don't quite comprehend what they're saying.
Yeah.
For instance, the part about power on power. Let's see if I can find that again.
8.10, the maximum speed of these craft is equal to the Earth energy squared.
No.
No.
Oh, I had it. Let's see. I'm gonna find it here real quick. Okay, so it's 8.6.
Mhm.
Towards the end of the second paragraph. The entities giving this information were in error, but we did many things at the end of this cycle in attempts to aid your harvest, in which we learned the folly of certain types of aid. That is a contributing factor to our more cautious approach at this state, even as the need is power upon power greater, and your people's call is greater and greater. Oh, now I understand it.
Yep.
Law squares,
Yeah, I think it's like exponential,
Yeah,
maybe.
right, exactly. Like to the third power or whatever, second power. Like now it's even needed more. Wow, this is pretty intense in a way too, right? About I guess what I'm interpreting that they're saying is almost like it's a very precarious situation that we're in, the human collective. Did anybody else interpret it that way?
Well, certainly we know that Ra says that the harvest is not, and again, this is the 80s, but the harvest is a troubled harvest. The conditions of Earth are making it such that the harvest is not unfolding smoothly, and it's going to take some aid to help the harvest complete.
Yeah.
Regardless of which polarity as a social memory complex we harvest, or just in general, because different social people will be harvested differently.
I mean, I take it to mean in general, because of the
Yeah.
level of disharmony and the level of mixed, just how deeply and powerfully mixed the Earth mind is, both in terms of intention towards direction, service to self or service to other, but also in terms of all these different star origins and all these different, it is so complex here. From an exopolitical standpoint, there's so many ETs here. There's so many soul races on the Earth. There's so many wanderers. I mean, it's just like it is such a drama down here, you guys.
No matter, it's like it seems like we're experiencing a mass bipolar type, it's like, I mean, so many people struggle with that diagnosis, right? Or that complex.
Yeah.
And from this perspective, I'm like, oh my gosh, no wonder.
Yep. Right. Well, and it's almost like it's fair to say that if you were to do a psychological analysis of the planetary mind, it's kind of bipolar schizophrenic. We are kind of bipolar schizophrenic. We've got some entities who are trying their best to make it to the negative harvest, or some entities who are trying their best to make it a positive. Lots of entities just kind of like spinning around, not really clear what they're doing. And lots of different ideas about who we are and what we should be up to as a planet. Lots of different non-harmonious ideas.
Yeah. I'd love to see your face again, Scott, if you're willing.
Where is my face?
Where's your face?
Where's your face?
I noticed that I was getting the sign that my video is unstable, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think that was most impactful when you were reading. So, yeah. It's up to you, though, obviously. one of the things that I found to be interesting about part of the reading was that the Confederation gave some technology to the Russians.
Mhm.
And then also that they say that was done in error, and we learned the folly of certain types of aid, and just how parallel that is to what they said about the pyramid technology.
Mhm.
And I've always just sort of assumed, and somehow I guess the last couple of times that I've read through, I didn't pick up on that. Like I've just always kind of assumed like, oh, okay, we learned our lesson from the pyramids because we've been with you ever since then. But there's others from the Confederation, who are still giving technology in an attempt to aid, and that was folly. Like it's just like, oh gosh, fascinating that they're still doing that, and then also fascinating that it still went awry seemingly. And also then like there's some tenderness or something for me that's like, but don't stop helping, like keep helping us, like we still want you around, we still want your help. Yeah, there's like nervousness for me of I don't want their help to go awry, in terms of like giving us technology that we're not going to use well. Anyway, yeah, that stood out to me, and I don't think I ever picked up on that part before.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, it's a really complex, it's such a complex situation because, there's within the Confederation, my understanding is you've got a real wide diversity of kinds of aid being offered. And a lot of the aid is just they're offering teachings of what's really going on, and the teachings of like how to get yourself into the flow of the upward spiral, how to get yourself, yourselves into the flow of evolution so that you can make good use of the conditions you're in, so like meditation, all these like basic lessons that they offer through channeling. They do dream visitations. There's all these ways that they impress these spiritual teachings on humanity. But then there's a lot of people in humanity, and I think it's probably here too in our group, where it's like, yeah, that's all well and good, but like we've got some major environmental problems we're looking at, and like geopolitically, the bellicosity, the war making machine is on an overdrive and has been, exerting so much control over people's lives for so long. And a lot of that has to do with energy and the control of oil and the control of, the energy systems of Earth. And so there's this big call going out, and has been for a long time, of like, well, if we just were freed from that, scarcity of energy, then we could unlock a utopian, we'd all be freed up to have the resources we need to really follow our passions and express our gifts and all these sorts of things. And so, so one Confederation member is like, well, let's just go ahead and give it to them. Let's give them some free energy or whatever, right? And then they just don't quite get how deep the dynamic is here of like any power, any technology that can harness power is going to be weaponized. The military industrial complex just weaponizes everything. It's so crazy. They just somehow aren't able to, like, I think this is just my opinion, just don't quite get how that all, it's certain that if they're to give technology, even in the best of intentions, it's going to find its way into a weaponized format. I think it seems to be the trend.
Yeah, I kind of have a thought about that. Responses for so long now, we, as a race, been at war with each other for basically control of the planet, or I mean, if you go back far enough, it was just control of a certain part of the planet. This has been going on for so many generations that we've created enemies of each other. So there's a great amount of fear that like the other is going to get it and weaponize it, but so we got to do it first. And it just keeps escalating along that path. you know, so what's it gonna take for you know, the power, you know, people in great positions of power, governments or corporations, whatever, to come together, and will it happen?
Seems super unlikely. It's
What's that? Seems what?
super unlikely that there's going to be global unity before harvest is complete. But
Make it
honestly, I would take it as a massive success if Earth just makes it through and doesn't like have a big nuclear, you know, blow off.
Yeah.
Given the karma, you know, of the Mars souls and the Maldek souls that are all still working out their karma, you know, it's like if we can just make it through with like keeping the biosphere intact, that's good. That's forward progress, y'all. That's good.
And even if it's not nuclear, so many bioweapons are being used. You know, and these other things that they're talking about with the weather manipulation.
Yeah. Psychotronic weapons. Does anyone have an
Yeah.
idea of what a psychotronic weapon is?
Sounds like psychological, like messing with your brain.
That's what I was thinking too, that like some of the stuff they do with MK Ultra, like they can attack you with thought forms.
Weren't there
You-
reports at like some certain embassies of people getting headaches or something?
That's right. The Havana effect, I think they've come to call it. Because the most famous account of that was in the Cuban embassy, the US embassy in Cuba. And then people that worked there had these really strange symptoms. No one really could figure it out. And then eventually it got assigned to, there was some sort of remote weapon being used on the people who worked there. So now they call it the Havana syndrome, I think.
Mhm.
It's been popping up in the news recently too, this Havana syndrome. But yeah, those were apparently remote energy weapons, and including psychotronic weaponry.
Is anybody familiar with the voice of God?
What is that?
They can
What
project,
is that other than the voice of God?
well, they can remotely project, you know, they can remotely project voices into people's minds,
Mhm.
brains.
That's what it is specifically.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
So whether it's an individual or
Sounds
collective.
wacky.
Yeah. Totally wacky.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So already in the chapter so far, there's 3 distinct classes of technology that get unveiled here. There's the craft themselves, which they say are using the power source for the craft is the electromagnetic energy of the Earth sphere that polarizes the Earth. Okay. So that's the craft that can, you know, that have quote unquote anti-gravity, or, you know, whatever. They're able to fly without combustion fuel. And then there's the weaponization of those craft, which, you know, there's the weather modification weapons and the psychotronic weapons. Yeah, and all 3 of those are like, whoa. Okay. Do you all know about Stephen Greer?
Yeah.
Dr. Stephen Greer? My opinion is that Stephen Greer's documentaries, I think there's now 4 of them, and there's going to be another one coming out here soon. I think they're the best source to get a handle on this topic in a more contemporary way. So to really understand the global dynamic of UFOs and the secrecy around them, the military industrial complex, how that all works. His documentaries just do such an excellent job. I think they're really well done. Now the caveat is he's got a really strong opinion that there are no such thing as negative ETs. I don't know. I can't imagine. I sort of can't imagine that he actually believes that. I have a hunch that he just says that because if he didn't say that, it would become so sensationalized. I'm not sure. Maybe he believes that, but he's just so well informed. It's hard for me to believe that he believes that. But outside of that, I think the information that he does he puts forward in his documentaries and his talks is excellent. And I'd highly recommend them. They're all available for free for viewing.
Yeah, I've followed him for years and I've watched everything so far, I'm pretty sure. I like him a lot too. I do think Cosmic Disclosure is more comprehensive. If you watch 120 something episodes of Cosmic Disclosure, because of all the people that they bring on to corroborate Corey's testimony, like David Adair, who was a child prodigy scientist, and then he was, of course, recruited and worked in Area 51, and he goes in how he went there. It was like the Nazis that were like running it because they had the engineer, and he goes into that part in detail. There's so many people, and just Corey's 20 years in the 20 back program.
Yeah, that's a fascinating download. I mean, I respect Corey a lot and all those folks who did that. I respect David Wilcock too. My opinion is they're not quite as balanced. Just personally, that's my sense, is that there's some mixed channel coming through there, mixed information, mixed nature. Stephen Greer started off, before he was a doctor, he was a student of Vedanta. He learned Sanskrit, he learned meditation, then he became a meditation teacher. He taught Sanskrit and meditation when he was really young. He had a contact experience when he was really young.
Mhm.
And then that was the underpinning of the rest of his adult life. He became an emergency, medical doctor, and then left that to do the disclosure project. And I think that helped him a lot and helps him a lot stay grounded and balanced, that meditative practice that he has. It's hard to navigate this stuff. It's so easy to get unbalanced when you get into these topics. It's so sensational. It's so highly contentious. There's so much misinformation and disinformation circulating in the groups who are really interested in this stuff. Like if you go online and you get involved in these groups, there's a lot of interest. And from what I have experienced, it's very fraught with, unbalance.
I used to follow some of that and I had to stop following it because it was impossible for me to tell like what was grounded and what was BS. And
Exactly.
It's impossible to verify anything.
Right.
And it's just he says, she says. And at the end of the day, I couldn't tell what was legitimate. So I just stopped following all of it because it wasn't getting me anywhere.
Yeah.
It's like, there's all the countries have UFOs and they're all gonna kill each other. It's like at the end of the day, it doesn't help me grow spiritually.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Hi, Yuri.
Hey, Yuri's here. All right.
Random question. I haven't heard from David Wilcock in a while. I checked on his website the other day. I saw he hadn't updated it in a long time. Is he still around?
He's still around. I think he's gone off a little bit off the rails, you guys. I mean, again, take it with a grain of salt, do your own due diligence, but I think he's been pressed hard on by negatives, and I think he's got some hooks in him. I think he's got some self-interest going on. I think he's got some I want to be the one. He's got some ego issues he hasn't worked out.
Yeah. I mean, Corey even said that to him, that Ra told Corey or something that because David was at one step, he was assuming that he was going to be harvested. Conversation, and Corey gave some information back about that, he had to work on his ego. I remember that distinctly, and David was kind of taken aback, but I could see it clearly. To me, it was clear.
Yeah.
And I do see that with him too. I think, and I think, probably both of them. I mean, Corey was very explicit about coming under attack and being abducted, not by aliens, but people in the military industrial complex who didn't like him saying things and giving truth serum and all this stuff. So I think he's impacted by it for sure in the later stages, but watching it so closely and so intensely for so long, I was.
Scott, you're cutting out.
Telling the truth, but that's just my perception.
You're cutting out a little bit, Scott.
Yeah. We're dropping some words from you a little bit.
Whoopsies.
Whoopsies. So Yuri, we are on session 8 this week, and we've read through 8.9 or something. No, let's see.
8.11.
The 8.11. It's a very UFO heavy session, right? I assume you've read it already. Yeah.
So we're in the transient material. Should we keep going?
Sure, let's keep going. Let's pick up at
One
8.12.
more quick comment, which is,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I noticed that like in this session, Ross started talking about social memory complex and our social memory complex, which I assume like he's referring to the future potential social memory complex. So the first thing that 8.2 that last part, this further muddles the vibratory nexus of your social memory complex, causing a situation where neither those oriented towards serving others nor serving self can gain the power energy to open the intelligent infinity gates for the social memory complex. So in this case, the social memory complex does, I'm not sure if it like already exists in latent form, because I think doesn't he say like the Akashic records are the social memory complex, and that's what Edgar Casey tapped into, or if this is like a future thing, or if it already exists. Like I just noticed that this is, I don't think he ever directly referred to like the social memory complex of this planet until this session, right? This
It's a good catch. That's a good catch, Shong. I'm not sure. I didn't fully process that. Yeah, somehow I took in that information without noticing, oh, right, they are referring to a social memory complex. And I think you're right. My sense is that like there is certainly there's an unpotentiated social memory complex in the 80s and probably still, and it doesn't get potentiated until fourth density. Usually, I mean, it's very rare for it to happen in third density. But I sort of feel like from Ra's perspective, they already tell us that they don't see us separate. They don't see the people of Earth separate. They see us as one entity. So I kind of feel like it would be an easy mistake for them to make too. I'm not saying it's a mistake that they said it mistakenly, but they do in other parts of the material, they'll say mind, body, spirit instead of mind, body, spirit complex, or they'll say mind, body, spirit complex instead of mind, body, spirit. So, they are prone to error around how they use complex. And because they've already told us that they don't see us as separate, like they see us as a social memory complex. They see the Earth as an entity, and they don't see the distinction of humans the same way we do. So I don't know if it's on purpose and they're speaking about the latent form, like you say, Shong, or if it's just a mistake.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so we're picking up at 8.12. Okay, questioner. At the same time, you mentioned that some of the landings were of our peoples. You also mentioned that some were of the Orion group. We talked a little about the Orion group, but why do the Orion group land here? What is their purpose? I am Ra. Their purpose is conquest. Unlike those of the Confederation who wait for the calling, the so-called Orion group calls itself to conquest. Questioner, specifically, what do they do when they land? Ra, there are two types of landings. In the first, entities among your peoples are taken on their craft and programmed for future use. There are 2 or 3 levels of programming. First, the level that will be discovered by those who do research. Second, a triggering program. Third, a second and most deep triggering program, crystallizing the entity, thereby rendering it lifeless and useful as a kind of beacon. This is a form of landing. The second form is that of landing beneath the Earth's crust, which is entered from water. Again, in the general area of your South American and Caribbean areas, and close to the so-called Northern Pole. The bases of these people are underground. Questioner, what do the Orion group have? What's the objective with respect to the conquest of the Orion group? I am Ra. As we have said previously, their objective is to locate certain mind-body-spirit complexes which vibrate in resonance with their own vibrational complex. Then to enslave the unelite, as you may call those who are not of the Orion vibration. All right, let's pause there. That's dark. The whole negative programming technology is pretty unsavory.
So like, I always wondered, like, why don't they just like, I mean, if you look at Earth history, like, there's an empire that wants to assimilate its neighbor. They just send an army and take it over. Why doesn't the Orion just send over an army and just enslave everyone?
Well, they get into that later. They get into the metaphysics of direct conquest and war and direct landing versus remaining behind the scenes and trying to, through deceit and spreading negative philosophy, get people of their own free will to join the Orion group and to sort of get on board with the negative agenda. And they talk about the metaphysical polarity differences of those two approaches, those two strategies. And apparently it's very difficult, it's very depolarizing for them for direct conquest.
Did you mean in a later session?
Yeah, in a later session. Mm-hmm.
It's depolarizing if it doesn't work.
Correct. Well, and the Confederation they're pretty focused on helping Earth to avoid that. Like there's defensive forces at play. The Confederation is trying to help make it so the Orions can't just come do that. So.
Like the quarantine?
Yeah, the quarantine, exactly. I mean, Ra at one point says that's one of the main purposes of the Confederation is to hold open the conditions on Earth for third density to unfold naturally, which means to make it so souls can choose either the positive or the negative path. And if the Orions came and landed and just brought all their tech and tried to, expand their empire, they would probably, if the Confederation wasn't in a defensive position, I'm sure they would succeed. Like we wouldn't be able to fend them off, I don't imagine. Yuri.
Yes, I don't remember exactly the part when Russ said that they could come if they would, if Confederation would not defend us, that or Orion group would come and defeat us. I don't see the point of someone doing this if like someone is very powerful and of course, he can defeat someone who is very less powerful, but there is no like potential to evolve in such a way. You are evolving when you are having difficult task, and to conquer humans on the third density is not a task for someone who is in fourth density. So, but by manipulating us in the way they do, this is a task, and I don't think they will enjoy doing it by the power, by the direct power. That's my perception.
Yeah. I don't know if any of you remember this, but I think I read somewhere that, like, Don asks, what is the Orion Empire's objective, not on Earth, but in general? And I think Ra says that they actually do try to conquer third density planets before they've harvested. Like, as though at least on some planets, that is what they try to do. But
by direct intervention.
I think so, because not all planets have a quarantine like Earth does. Like the Orion group they have to slip through the quarantine. It is possible for them to land here, but there's some metaphysical barrier, and they can't just come in full force. They have to find holes in the quarantine and slip through. And I guess on some planets there isn't a quarantine. There's something about what's happened in our solar system that caused the Guardians and the Council of Saturn to install a quarantine.
The quarantine was installed just because there was some because a lot of complexes here are from Mars, and it has to see with Mars not defending us from the Orion group. So I don't see really the point for our Orion group to come and to defeat us by the force. It will not lead to the goal.
Right.
I mean, they just want to enslave others, right? Like, you get.
Well, they
power
also
from
want to
enslaving.
spread negative philosophy. They want to like encourage souls to believe in the elitism of the Orions and of them, of themselves, and hook people into the philosophy that is elitism. Elitism is the core of negative philosophy.
Mhm.
So they spread negative philosophy just like the Confederation spreads positive philosophy. Like, they're sending signals to Earth and scanning souls for who's interested in this elitism business. And then they channel and they give information, they give teachings, and they give philosophy, and they give technology, just like the Confederation does, except on the dark side.
It seems like they're also trying to, just in all of that, they're trying to polarize negatively. That's their aim. And so any success in any of those areas would polarize them negatively.
Well, what's interesting? I wonder about that, because on the positive path, souls are interested in positively polarizing because it's a part of the spiritual journey. And I think that they get that. But on the negative path, they're not trying to finish. They're not trying to get back to God. They're not trying to complete the octave. They're not trying to unify. They're just trying to, like, gain as much power as they can. And
Right.
through that desire to gain power, they do polarize negatively. But I wonder if they're trying to polarize negatively. I don't know. Maybe it's just saying the same thing.
I mean,
Scott?
like, you look at
Oh, go ahead, Sean.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Like, there's so many examples on Earth, like there are these big corporations, and what is their goal? To increase their share value. And there's no end to how high your share value can go. Like, there's no end game. Like, I've heard stories of, like, people in New York. I've read interviews of, like, really rich stockbrokers in New York, but there's always someone richer. There's always someone that you can compare yourself to who's richer, and you need to be as rich as that person. Like, and you'll do whatever it takes to be even richer than you currently are.
Right. I just read we'll get to you, Scott, your comment here, Scott, in a moment, but I just read a quote, or a short little clip of a video from one of my favorite thinkers, Daniel Schmachtenberger. And he was talking about corporations. And he said, the fiduciary responsibility to maximize profit makes it, the corporation, a kind of an obligate sociopath. So what he's saying is, structurally, the pattern of corporations creates a sociopathic dynamic because of what you just, because of what you're talking about, Sean. Like, their purpose, like their entire design purpose, is to maximize shareholder profit. And there's no, there's no like moral compass installed. There's no limitation to growth. There's no limitation to extraction. And it's like they're sociopaths. It's a kind of social complex that's sociopathic, is his position. And I tend to agree with him.
Mhm. Yeah, I see it more and more. There's a quote from Maladome where he says, corporations are soulless entities. Another way of saying the same thing, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I had originally raised my hand to go back to the Orion group and their strategies, and my understanding, or the way I look at it, is they, similar to what you're saying, like they want to assimilate other cultures into theirs, or other planetary consciousness, or anybody who's willing to. And that they were successful in a sense with the Nazis. And there's reference to Adolf further down the material, but there's also and beyond that, like the Dark Fleet, which is all German, supposedly, not former Nazis or descendants of Nazis, whatever, and is highly weaponized, and has traveled beyond the solar system, I believe. And they, if I remember correctly, have fought intergalactically alongside the Orion group. So they chose to go that way. But I mean, it's so interesting too how Ra talks about further down the material. Roads the social memory complex itself, because they can't get past that.
I lost that last couple sentences. We say it again, Scott?
Yeah, further down in the material, Ra kind of explains how the infighting, amongst the negative path, erodes the social memory complex. So
Right.
It's a struggle for them to evolve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just add that I wonder, so that's like a little bit of like history from what I understand with the Dark Fleet, but I just also wonder, like, okay, how relevant is that now? Like what other factions of humanity are choosing to go that route? Because it seems like there is a pretty strong vested, I guess from one perception I have, the way I look at it is, it seems like there's certainly a pretty vast number of human beings, particularly in positions of power, politics, corporations, things like that, who maybe have lost their connection in any meaningful way to source, to spirit, to your own self, as an eternal soul, and hence the transhumanist movement, to merge with AI, like that's a thing now.
Yep.
I keep getting the message that my connection's unstable.
We got most of that. Yeah, but yeah, a little bit cutting out here and there.
Yeah. Amanda, you want to go next?
Sure. I mean, I'm going to change the subject. I'm wondering about this triggering program in 8.13. The triggering program, do they talk about what that is? Like that whole paragraph right there, I'm imagining that they are like abducting people and putting them on their crafts, and then what do they say? Rendering it lifeless and useful as a kind of beacon. Like, do they just like kind of take people's lives away and then use them as puppets? Like, what's going on there? Is there anywhere where there's more interpretation?
Yeah, let's discuss that. I certainly don't have an answer. They never really, as far as I know, they never really describe what that means. I've never really tried to probe into it because it just sounds so unsavory and dark. Anyone have any thoughts about what that could mean? these levels of programming?
I am not one who goes down the rabbit holes, so this is like not an informed like that in that way opinion. But just taking first, second, and third to be potentially scaled by degree of like impact on the one who is abducted, the triggering program sounded to me like, well, because the third is also described as a triggering program, a deep most deep triggering program. So what I took the second to be was some sort of powerful influence on the entity in order to use them in a certain way, but less than lifeless. So that's that, yeah. I don't know if that's helpful at all.
Yeah, part of what it brings up for me, I think, when I look at my own emotionality around this topic is like I'm aware of animal experimentation that humans do, you know, and like laboratory experimentation on animals, and it's just so heartbreaking to me. And I think like, well, yes, third density entities on Earth do experiments on second density entities. And I think that the Orion group is able to do, it's a similar fourth density entities or fifth density entities are able to like do all sorts of manipulate, you know, it's just like, oh God, I can't stomach it. Feels like shadow. It feels like my own like shame of like what humans have done, you know, to animals when I think about like, oh shit. Yeah, well, there's higher density entities doing it to humans too for their purposes. And I don't know why they would need a beacon, rendering it lifeless and useful as a kind of beacon. The heck?
So what does free will, like what the Orion group, do they not honor our free will, or would the people have to consent to something like that on some level?
No,
It's a great question,
negative
Amanda.
entities specifically don't honor free will.
Okay.
It's a power over kind of a situation.
That's right.
But there's something about metaphysics where if you break free will, like there are some universal laws that affect the polarity. At least that's what I'm getting from. I found the quote that we were talking about, where why Orion doesn't just come and land. I put it in the chat.
Oh.
You want to read it?
Yeah, read
Sure.
it.
Okay. 16.9. Questioner: if the Orion group was able to land, would this increase their polarization? What I'm trying to get at is it better for them to work behind the scenes and get recruits, shall we say, from our planet? The person on our planet going towards service to self strictly on his own free will? Or is it just as good for the Orion group to land upon this planet and demonstrate remarkable powers and get people like that? I'm Ra. The first instance is, in the long run, shall we put it, more salubrious for the Orion group, in that it does not infringe upon the law of one by landing and thus does its work through those of this planet. In the second circumstance, a mass landing would create a loss of polarization due to the infringement upon the free will of the planet. However, it would be a gamble. If the planet then were conquered and became part of the empire, the free will would then be reestablished. This is restrained in action due to the desire of the Orion group to progress toward the one creator. This desire to progress inhibits the group from breaking the law of confusion.
Wow. Okay, so that just resolved what I had said earlier.
Right.
They do desire to progress towards the one creator. That's surprising. It surprises me, but that's fascinating.
Well, that makes sense to me, or I've always kind of thought that one of the ways that they gain power is to progress, like that they're interested in polarizing because it's a way of gaining power. Like if they polarize negatively,
They want to
Yeah.
become gods. Like in their mind, progressing towards the one creator is becoming God.
God,
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Or their
But that has
perception.
nothing to do with like other people. Like fuck everyone else. I want to
Yeah.
be the god, so I
Right.
can make the world in my
Right.
image.
They want to become the one creator.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, and this quote, tempers what I said, to Amanda, that they specifically use power over, that when they do that, when they don't honor free will, like as I think this was the point that you were making, Shang, after I said that then it can depolarize them. So they do honor free will to a certain extent for their own polarization or not depolarization.
Right.
Yuri, what were you gonna say?
You remember those guys who were from fourth density and they were embodied, born on the Venus, and then they went on negative path.
Right.
I believe that those who those who choose the negative path, they do deeply believe that it's a way to go to the God, and it's a way to. I know the best way to go to God, and I have to suppress free will of other people for their benefit. So they truly believe this is a good way to go.
Yeah.
And it's better we suppress somebody's free will, and it will be for the benefit of all these. And it's the order, the fastest and the most proper way to go to God.
I agree with you. I think that the bad guys think that they're the good guys. Like everybody. No, but I don't think there are
Exactly.
anybody who thinks they're the bad guys. Everybody thinks they're doing the best thing they can do.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I do believe they do believe they do the best things possible, and what is going on now on the Earth with artificial intelligence as well. I think those people do believe they are doing their best for benefit of the whole humanity.
Right.
Which takes me back to that idea of Stephen Greer and, thinking that there are no evil entities, and from the perspective of a lot, if not, I mean, every mystic, there's no evil on the planet. It's all goodness. Like that makes sense to me, even knowing this material, that it isn't evil, it's serving the creator. And like what protects us from evil is loving them. And so, yeah, it just seems like being able to see negative entities as not evil is a good way to go.
I think still we have to accept that they have chosen the different way to learn God, and accept this without feeling disconnected from them. It's a very difficult task,
It's very difficult.
especially if you see that how it develops on the surface of everyday life.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think one of like a super powerful lesson that I have gotten from one of my teachers is to be how to be able to say I love you, and no, and to put those together. It's like, because sometimes we think like, I love you, so yeah, go ahead, and I think that lesson of I love you and no is applicable on so many levels, in our our intimate relationships, and also like with corrupt governments and whatever. I love you and no.
Yeah. Amanda, does that satisfy your curiosity for now? I know we didn't really give you any, we didn't really get to the bottom of that question, but yeah, okay. All right, let's pick up at 8.15. Anybody want to read?
Read.
Okay.
Was the landing at Pascagoula in 1973 when Charlie Hickson was taken on board this type of landing? I am wrong. The landing of which you speak was what you would call an anomaly. It was neither the Orion influence nor our people's in thought form, but rather a planetary entity of your own vibration, which came through quarantine in all innocence in a random landing. Questioner, what did they do to Charlie Hickson when they took him on board? I am wrong. They used his mind-body-spirit complex's life experience, concentrating upon the experience of the complexes of what you call war. Questioner, how did they use them? I am wrong. The use of experience is to learn. Consider a race who watches a movie. It experiences a story and identifies with the feelings, perceptions, and experiences of the hero. Questioner, was Charlie Hickson originally of the same social memory complex as the ones who picked him up? I am wrong. This entity of vibratory sound complex did not have a connection with those who used him. Questioner, did those who used him use his war experiences to learn more of the law of one? I am wrong. This is correct. Questioner, were the entities that picked him, is that the normal configuration of these entities? They, inaudible, rather unusual. I am wrong. The configuration of their beings is their normal configuration. The unusualness is not remarkable. We ourselves, when we chose a mission among your peoples, needed to study your peoples. For had we arrived in no other form than our own, we would have been perceived as light. Questioner, well, what density did the entities who picked up Charlie Hickson come from? What was their density? I am Ra. The entities in whom you show such interest are third density beings of a fairly high order. We should express the understanding to you that these entities would not have used the mind-body-spirit complex Charlie, except for the resolve of this entity before incarnation to be of service. Questioner, what was the home or origin of the entities that took Charlie? I am Ra. These entities are of the Sirius galaxy.
So I've got a couple of images here that I researched when I was looking into the Hickson contact. It's pretty famous. It's a pretty famous contact. This is a sketch that someone did based on Charlie Hickson's description of the entities who took him aboard their craft. And apparently the beings evolved from trees. The Syrian beings were not of, like, you know, the ape type or even an animal type. They actually evolved into third density from second density trees. And I guess they also levitated when they came. So this is one image, and then this is not quite as good of an image, but there's an image of the beings themselves. They're supposed to have very long arms, and also the craft was like a kind of an almond shape, and it was glowing blue, I think. Saucer-shaped craft with blue flashing lights, hazy blue object. And the entities had pointed ears, a nose, no eyes, and a slit mouth, long arms, 5 feet tall, pinchers or claws, they made a mumbling sound, pale gray skin, rounded feet or pads, elephant textured skin.
Wow.
So that's pretty.
Were they negative oriented or positive oriented?
Positive.
How do you know?
They get into it later. So the tree-based beings, they don't talk, they don't have thumbs, so they didn't like create the whole civilizational path of creating tools and creating warfare. Basically, they never had war in their third density, but they wanted to understand you know, what war is. So that I think their mission was to come to Earth because there's lots of war here. And they I guess were able to detect that at Charlie Hickson's higher self level, he was willing to be taken aboard their ship, and they like scanned his memory complex so that they could learn about war to try to balance their own evolutionary path. So they were yeah, they were a positively polarizing group. They were advanced. I mean, most third density civilizations don't travel intergalactically, or whatever, interstellar.
Were they the one that had a social memory complex at the end of third density?
I think so. Yeah.
They could also watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy. That would teach them about war.
You just send them your Netflix password, BJ.
Oh, good idea.
But
Okay.
So I have a little bit of a question in my mind about when they say that Charlie Hickson was predisposed, I forget the language, but before this incarnation to service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, like, did they have an arrangement then, like with this group, or just in general he was predisposed to service?
We don't know.
Right.
I had the same thought.
Mhm.
I mean, it sounded like, and I could be misinterpreting it, but Ross said he didn't have a connection with those who used him. And Ra also said, I think that it was random or something like that. In all innocence, in a random landing.
Right.
So
Good point.
doesn't sound like it was predetermined.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, let's finish up the reading. Let's get two people to read about five Q&As each. Anybody willing?
I'll read more.
Okay. You want to read about five, and then we'll switch.
Okay. Questioner, the most startling information that you've given me, which I must admit I'm having difficulty believing, is that the United States has 573 craft, like you describe. How many people in our government are aware that we have these? How many total people of United States designation are aware of this, including those who operate the craft? I am Ra. The number of your peoples varies, for there are needs to communicate at this particular time-space nexus, so that the number is expanding at this time. The approximate number is 1500, 1500. It is only approximate, for as your illusory time-space continuum moves from present to present at this nexus, many are learning. Questioner, where are these craft constructed? These craft are constructed one by one in two locations, in the desert or arid regions of your so-called New Mexico, and in the desert or arid regions of your so-called Mexico, both installations being under the ground. Questioner, do you say the United States actually has a manufacturing plant in Mexico? I am Ra. I spoke thusly. May I at this time reiterate that this type of information is very shallow and of no particular consequence compared to the study of the law of one. However, we carefully watch these developments in hopes that your peoples are able to be harvested in peace. Questioner, I am totally aware how this line of questioning is of no consequence at all, but this particular information is so startling to me that it makes me question your validity on this. Up until this point, I was in agreement with everything. This is very startling, and it does not seem possible that this secret could have been kept 27 years and that we're operating these craft. I apologize for my attitude, but I thought I would be very honest about this. It is unbelievable to me that we would operate a plant in Mexico outside of the United States to build these craft. Maybe I'm mistaken. These craft are physical craft built by our physical people. I could get in one and ride in one. Is that correct? I am Ra. This is incorrect. You could not ride in one. The United States, as you call your society divisional complex, creates these as a type of weapon. Questioner, there are no occupants then, no pilot, shall I say? I am wrong. This is correct. Questioner, how are they controlled? I am wrong. They are controlled by computer from a remote source of data.
Does anybody else want to pick up from there and finish the last few?
I can finish it. Why do we have a plant in Mexico? I'm Ra. The necessity is both for dryness of the ground and for near total lack of population. Therefore, your so-called government and the so-called government of your neighboring geographical vicinity arranged for an underground installation. The government officials who agreed did not know the use to which their land would be put, but thought it a governmental research installation for use in what you would call bacteriological warfare. Questioner, is this the type of craft that Dan Fry was transported in? I am Ra. The one known as Daniel was, in thought form, transported by Confederation thought form vehicular illusion in order to give his mind-body-spirit complex data so that we might see how this type of contact aided your people in the uncovering of the intelligent infinity behind the illusion of limits. Questioner, would it be possible for any of us to have some type of contact with the Confederation in a more direct way? I'm Ra. In observing the distortions of those who underwent this experiential sequence, we decided to gradually back off, shall I say, from direct contact and thought form. The least distortion seems to be available in mind-to-mind communication. Therefore, the request to be taken aboard is not one we care to comply with. You are most valuable in your present orientation. Questioner, the reason that I have questioned you so much upon the craft which you say the United States government operates is that if we include this in the book, it will create numerous problems. It is something that I am considering leaving out of the book entirely, or I am going to have to question you in considerable detail about it. It is difficult to even question in this area, but I would like maybe to ask a few more questions about it with still the possible option of leaving it out of the book. What are the diameter of these craft in the United States? Inaudible. I am Ra. I suggest that this be the last question for this session. We will speak as you deem fit in further sessions, asking you to be guided by your own discernment only. The approximate diameter, given several model changes, is 23 of your feet as you measure. May we ask at this time if you have a needed short query before we end this session? Questioner, is there anything that we can do to make the instrument more comfortable? I am Ra. The instrument is well balanced. It is possible to make small corrections in the configuration of the spine of the instrument that it will be straighter. Continue also to carefully monitor the placement and orientation of the symbols used. This particular session, the sensor is slightly off, and therefore this instrument will experience a slight discomfort. Questioner, is the sensor off with respect to the angle or with respect to the lateral displacement? There is an approximate 3-degree displacement from proper perpendicularity. I am Ra. I leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one creator. Adonai.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, Don can't believe it. Which is interesting because, you know, Don, I mean, in some ways, Don's centralizing focus for research was UFO contact. Like Don was an expert in his time. He was in touch with people all over who had been contacted, you know, who had seen UFOs, who had been, you know, into a UFO. My understanding is that UFOs were pretty central to his research, even though he was interested in the spiritual dimension to it. But as we know, like there is a pretty strong bridge between the UFO study and spirituality. But this whole thing about the US government having secret facilities and building UFOs just was too much for him to believe. What problems do you all think he was imagining if he published this information? When he says, oh, this is going to cause problems, I put this in the book, so I might have to take it out. What do you imagine he was thinking would happen if he published it?
I imagine that first he didn't completely trust it. So he may have been concerned that like he could be putting out false information.
Mm-hmm.
And even if that wasn't the case, like he came to trust it, that it's so secretive that he could come under attack from, get a visit from the CIA or whatever.
Uh-huh.
you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I was sort of thinking that he thought people would write the whole thing off. People would write the law of one off and the teachings off if they're like, oh, whatever, this is conspiracy theory. This is nonsense. And he was
Mhm.
concerned about people throwing out the baby with the bathwater or whatever. What a horrible metaphor.
I know. Don't do it.
Yeah, keep the bathwater. Come on. I couldn't help myself. Oh,
I just wonder what the general
Speaking of
consensus
babies.
back then was. Oh, baby.
Oh, baby.
The consensus
No,
about
about yeah, under secret secret weapons and secret crafts and like the CIA in general and all of that stuff. Like I wonder, I mean, was it something that people really thought much about back in the early 80s? I mean, a lot of people just don't even believe it's going on right now,
right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say considerably less people than today.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, the internet changed everything in terms of people being able to like share information and connect with others who are researching this or researching that, or yeah, for sure. One of the things I want to share with y'all is this is what I learned. This really changed my thought about how secrecy happens at high levels of government. The Manhattan Project, when the United States government developed the nuclear weapons,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
it was a phenomenally massive effort, scientific and industrial, and like all the different specialization that needed to come together to build the bomb required people from all different disciplines and studies. And I mean, I think it was like tens of thousands of people were involved, but there were only they compartmentalized the entire program.
Mhm.
And there were only literally a dozen people who actually knew the whole, that knew what was happening. There was 12 people who knew the project. Everyone else below them had varying degrees of understanding, but almost nobody knew what they were doing. So these scientists were working on this weapon and they had no idea that they were working on an atomic bomb, even though there was thousands and thousands of people working on it. And that just shocked me. And this is official. That's not this isn't, what I'm saying isn't, hotly contentious or something. It was designed that way. And it worked to pull off this massively complex scientific achievement through this compartmentalization process. And I just was really surprised by that, because there's these secret things that people wonder about, well, could it be possible that, whatever, insert conspiracy theory X, Y, or Z. And people are like, oh no, we would know. They couldn't have done something like that. People would know, too many people would know. But when I learned that about the Manhattan Project, I was like, whoa, there's totally a way to structure things that, people who do in this, and especially in the, the intelligence agencies or national security agencies, they know, they've mastered how to compartmentalize information to make it so that very few people know what they're working on or what's really going on.
Yeah, it's the same from my understanding in Area 51, like what they're referring to. And I didn't even know about the one in Mexico.
Yeah,
Top secret.
top secret.
I used to work at Oak Ridge National Lab, and there's a lot of projects that you don't know what you're working on.
What was the name of
I
it?
never worked on any of those, but a lot of my colleagues who had access, they don't want to know what they're working on.
What was the name of the place?
I worked at Oak Ridge National Lab, which is where the Manhattan Project happened.
Mhm.
That's why I'm stuck here in Tennessee.
So do you know what I'm talking about? The compartmentalization?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a museum where there's a museum now here where they talk about how they kept the project secret.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of compartmentalization. People had a lot of cover stories. It was very well organized.
Crazy.
Well, I could ask a question about this one short paragraph that I had a hard time deciphering.
Sure.
It's in the 8.30. And Don asks, is this the type of craft that Dan Fry was transported in?
Uh-huh.
And Ross says, the one known as Daniel was in thought form, transported by Confederation thought form vehicular illusion in order to give this mind body spirit complex data so that we might see how this type of contact aided your people in the uncovering of the intelligent infinity behind the illusion of limits. The hell does that mean? I'm sorry. I can't quite fully decipher that paragraph.
Yeah. So they talk about thought form as a kind of sighting, a UFO sighting.
Yeah, I get that much.
And they talk about it in contrast to a physical vehicle, a physical craft.
Yeah.
It seems like what they're saying is that they kind of like produce the experience for Dan Fry of being taken onto a ship,
Yeah.
but it didn't actually happen.
Uh-huh.
But they were trying to experiment and see if that experiment would produce the same kind of experience to opening the entity to infinity, to the mystery that a physical experience would have. Like they say that when the Confederation members come and they show themselves in the sky, the reason they do that is to basically like help people become interested in the mystery, become interested in spiritual seeking. And so I think it seems like they were trying to experiment and see like, well, what if we just give the person the illusion of having the experience, does it do the same thing?
Okay. So that's what they meant when behind the illusion of
Yeah.
limit.
I think so.
I have a follow-up, which hopefully isn't too off topic. But so they say, hey, based off the experiment, we decided not to do that. And we're just gonna use mind-to-mind telepathic communication, probably channeling. In the Telegram post, someone posted like a YouTube channel to like some Pleiadian work.
Oh yeah. This is fascinating to me, this channel.
So I checked it out. They're like blog posting on the internet.
Yep.
That seems to be a new, if it's legitimate, that seems like a new protocol for contact.
Totally.
That's not channeling,
Exactly.
not mind to mind.
Yep.
Like we'll just post on your internet.
Right. BJ?
I have something to say about that. Aaron and I were talking about that one day, like, and could this be like a new way that they're communicating with us? And we're pondering about that. Gosh, is that like, could off-world entities or higher density entities like communicate directly through technology with us in that way? And to me, it was like, it seems plausible. I don't see why not. And then the next day, I have an alarm on my phone every day at 11 o'clock. And I was driving and going to be changing time zones at some point, but I was like an hour away from changing time zones. And I was like, is my alarm going to change? Will I have changed time zones by then? But no, it was still 11 o'clock where I was at 11 o'clock and my alarm didn't go off, which is strange because it goes off every day at 11 o'clock. But then I changed time. So that was weird. But then I changed time zones, like almost like right before it was about to be noon. So it bumped my phone back. Okay, now it was 11 o'clock again. It didn't go off again. But then at 11:11, my alarm went off after it had skipped 11 o'clock twice. And that was just like, that's weird. Why did it skip 11 o'clock twice? And then it went off at 11. There's no reason that my alarm should go off at 11:11, except that
11 o'clock twice is 11:11.
so weird. but our daily meditation starts at 11:11. And to me, I just got an immediate hit when it went off at 11:11 after it had skipped 11 o'clock twice. It was like confirmation came. It was like, yes, we are communicating to you through your technology. And this is confirmation of that. So that's what it seemed like to me.
Yeah. Yuri?
You want to say something, Yuri?
I want to kind of object. In some session, Russ speaks a lot about traveling through like about traveling, and he describes the difference in the traveling of positive polarities, entities, and negative entities. And what he says that negative entities start to travel with the power of they thought only in the end of the fifth density, I think so. So very late in comparison to traveling by thought power of positive entities in the middle, or maybe even, I think it's like a middle of fourth density. So what he says that developing technology is much more easy, and it is what negative entities do in comparison to working on own abilities, what positive entities do. So I think so that's my perception, and I think that we have to be very careful with technologies in daily life. And the example of Atlantis, what they did, reaching high technological advancement. So we can learn from this experience. And when they would use technologies, it would mean that we don't need to develop our abilities to be able to connect with them through dreams, through all kind of things which we can learn from raw material. So I think I would say that we can communicate with positive beings only through mastering our own abilities, not technologies.
Yeah. The technological path versus the consciousness path, you're saying? Yeah.
So it's like almost not possible to combine technologies with development of technologies with spiritual, with positive path for me. We can use them, but at one point we have to choose whether we develop technologies and it gives us enormous power and very big possibility that this power will be used to manipulate others, or we develop our own abilities, personal abilities to be useful for others and to serve others.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that point, Yuri. I appreciate that a lot. And I tend to agree with you. And Ra, as far as I understand, Ra said that they went the path of consciousness. They, in third density, they were studying, meditation and, all about the spiritual evolution. And that they didn't develop as a civilization, they didn't develop technologies very much. They used consciousness technologies. And now we know, of course, that they are able to travel intergalactically. They're able to, all these things, and that there's no technology involved. However, I understand the distinction you're making, but I don't think Ra says that any positive social memory complex does not choose to take the path of technology. I think some positive civilizations also choose the path of technology, and some choose
Sean
the path.
put a quote in there about it. As
Yeah, it's just-
positive fifth density moves into 6, there are virtually no entities which any longer use outer technology for travel or communication.
Right.
But it also does say, while positive is mastering that, there are positive entities who use the outer technology.
Yeah. I think there are some positive groups that use tech. but I still appreciate your point, Yuri, and I agree with you. I think that exactly what you said about the Atlanteans, like once you've got tech, and you can multiply power, it's, you know, like the potential for misuse and abuse is, you know, is great, quite great.
And I think you get a dependency on it as a, you know what I mean? So I can see how, yes, it's possible for both, but I like what BJ just quoted too. That makes sense to me when you get up, but I was just thinking about it in that that's kind of like part of our dilemma, right? Like with anything, you know, like, oh, I have a dependency on this cell phone. Like I leave the house and I'm like, oh no, I panic. You know what I mean? And yet I've done all this other stuff, like through tracker school and stuff. And I know that like, and I feel like my dependency on this interferes with my ability to maybe activate those things. Because it's so easy,
Me
right?
too.
More work to do the other thing,
Totally.
more discipline, self-discipline,
That's right.
discipline of the personality.
Yep, exactly. Yuri?
Yes, I believe before the whole humanity will, or like not humanity, but entities in the beginning of the first density positive, before they switch to the social memory complex, I believe there will be small junctions or unions of people who switch to merge their consciousness in order to be able to exchange not thoughts but some visual conceptions through the direct mind communication. And it's possible if we will try and develop it. But if we use cell phone, no chance. No chance. I mean, you have to choose whether you use cell phone or you practice this thing. And it's where and there are a lot of examples for this. Like I have been to Spain, and there was as a child, and I didn't talk any word in Spanish. But after 2 months of living in Spanish society, I learned very easily and quickly Spanish, because I didn't talk to anybody in Ukrainian or Russian. So you have to practice it.
Yeah.
So I believe it's possible to combine positive pulse with text, but it's like very small chances. Very small chances.
Yeah. Maybe so. Well, friends, we have gone a bit over. I apologize for that, but it's 6 minutes past the hour. So let's close our session for this week. I want to thank you all so much for a really sweet conversation. Very transient information, but it ended up being really stimulating for me anyway. So thanks for your balanced contributions. Appreciate you all very much. And we'll pick it up again next week.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Hope to see you all next
Bye,
week.
y'all.
My mom is coming to visit on Saturday. So either Sunday I won't be here because we're doing something, or she might be here with me on the session.
Exciting.
Totally interesting.
Cool.
So I think it's a good chance.
Cool.
I love moms.
Yeah, it's cool.
All right, y'all.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Love you, Scott.
Bye. See you soon.
See ya.